Welcome. Welcome once again as we travel into the mystic. I'm Kayleen McCaw, coming to you from the heart of Wildwood Gardens, sending out the carrier wave that extends the power of extension into the same form as the form of all that is. The mystic is that place behind the scenes at the human experience where we consciously play by the rules behind the rules, the way better rules, the rules that put us back in charge, the rules that make sense of what the ancients have been telling us for the longest time. Increasingly, the mystic is the place where science meets spirituality, and everybody says, wow, guess we did have the same thing in mind all along, didn't we? So I light the cup of joy. I put forth the fragrance of wholeness and dedicate this time to a quest for capital T truth. Calling in all of the help that is available, known and unknown, by names accepted, by names rejected, calling forth the truth that arises between two honest seekers, calling forth the information that is needed for everyone who has a divine appointment to be here with us, no matter how far it is in the future, and knowing that that's exactly what happens. What you ask for is what you get, whether you ask for it on purpose or whether you ask for it by accident. And it works a lot better when you ask on purpose. So my guest today is Steve McAllister, a Sarasota native, author, performer, all-around mensch, decent guy who's been thinking about the same kind of things I've been thinking about for a long time. And we're specifically going to have the kind of jaw you don't get to have with a lot of people about what happens when you realize that unless you forgive God, you're just not going forward. Because one of the things we have in common is the status of what you might say, recovering Christian. Hello, Steve.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure.
Sure.
So what you been up to in the most recent past? Give us a little catch up.
In the most recent past, I got myself a PA system several months ago, and I'm now realizing that I can also use it to record my songs. And so I've got it patched into my computer, and I'm laying down tracks on my 6-string guitar, my 12-string guitar, my vocals and drums, and then I'm having other artists contribute tracks to go along with it. And so I've been doing that. I've got about 30 original songs that I've written, and so now I'm getting them to where I can really share them out there and let them do some good.
Nice.
So that's what I've been doing most recently as a songwriter. Yeah.
I love that technology. That's been one of my dreams, is because it's really possible now. You can sing a song with the whole world and just kind of watch it assemble virtually in front of you.
Yeah. I was telling my friend Wayne, who he has a Jump Dog Studios is his business, and he's just an amazing mixer, an amazing musician, and was telling him what I was doing. He's like, remember that, Chris Christopherson recorded all his songs on a 4-track recorder, And so there's a lot of songs that have been produced that way on technology less than what is currently on our phones. So, there's so much we have the capabilities of producing now is just astounding. Yeah. And so putting my my technology to good work.
Excellent. Excellent. The reason that, I guess the thing that really triggered me to contact you and ask if we could have this conversation is you posted something recently that harkened back to a conversation we had, time gets away from me, a while back, about Jubilee. Yeah. And Jubilee is this concept that I learned during my contact with way far right. How did that ever happen to me? Fundamentalism, which, I look back on and say, wow, I learned a lot, and I want the good stuff back. And I'm not going to be committed to my injuries and my offense. I'm going to, harvest the whole of my life and see what good it makes going forward. Gosh, I don't want to start off with a long technical explanation of what Jubilee is. Let's come back to that when it comes in more harmonious. But what it amounts to is, okay, I guess I am. So the Jewish people in addition to holding on to this legacy of, pain and hurt feelings that kind of keep us all from going forward, are also holding on to the answer to that very problem, which is this concept of Jubilee. That if you follow the old system, the old system that still shows up in perfect timing in the cycles of the moon, they're still right on schedule with the prophetic stuff when it comes down to the things that are happening in the stars when you look at it from a lunar calendar perspective. But one of the original parts of the law, the capital L law, is that every period of 50 whatevers, you have a do-over. 50 days, 50 weeks, 50 years, 50 millennia, 50, that there's this concept that there has to be built into the system of guilt, a system of release. And in Christianity, it comes down to, it says, the whole story. But it's part of the financial thing, because this is the system that gave us our whole current idea of debt, which becomes debt slavery. And, this kind of thing we don't know how to get out of. But inside that very structure is the idea that once every so often, and we're way overdue for one of those so oftens, there comes a time where, the big, this is how it works or else it's never going to work law says you've got to release everybody from the promises they made, because if there's not an end point, we all suffer forever. That was a whole lot of words. Does that make sense?
It made sense.
Good. Jubilee. If there was ever a time when we need it real bad, it sure seems like now.
Yeah, it sure does. I'm not a proponent of the Bible at all. And I read through a lot of the laws in Leviticus and a few of them, they're just insane. They're crazy. Yeah. Things that, I can't believe that God actually said these are what we should do. However, I have to recognize there are people who do. And because that book, has in Leviticus chapter 25, it has this outline of what Jubilee is and how it should work. And not only should all debt be forgiven every 50 years, but every 7 years, we should let the earth go back to what it needs to be. Right. So, there's that as well. And so, letting the earth go where it should be. Can you hang on a second?
Sure. Yeah, that's where we get the idea of sabbatical that I learned from my mother, who came from an educational background. Every 7 years, you should just take a year off and remember who you are. It's part of this whole cycle. That's why the 7th day of the week is the Sabbath day. It's part of this same idea that there's a time for labor, and then there's a time to gather yourself back together so you have what you need to continue laboring. So I was talking about how the whole idea of sabbatical and the Sabbath fits into that. That there's this natural rhythm that really makes a whole lot of sense. And what we tend to remember about the whole Judeo-Christian world is all the stuff that went crazy and got us in this fix. That the process that I've been really kind of confronted with a lot lately is that if I can forgive God for being inside of a really stupid story that didn't work, that, there's a lot of good stuff to mine out of that. And, right. And being able to say, yes, there is goodness in this thing, builds a lot of bridges to people who will not for anything come out of that world. So why not find the common ground?
Yeah, exactly. And I look at it like, even though humans created this whole monetary system, as you said, they recognized there was debt built into it. Mm-hmm. And, they realized pretty quickly that every 50 years, the debt is going to get enormous. It's going to get too much to pay. Like the debt we have now, there is more debt in the world than there is money. All the debt we've created, there's no way to pay it. It's impossible. It's just impossible. And very early on, using money, they realized this, and these men wrote it into the law that every year, 50 years, we're going to have to do it. Now, it was never actually practiced. There's rumor that, smaller areas had started practicing this, and that's where the idea came from. But it's not been something that the church or the Jewish faith has ever really said, we're going to really do this in recorded history. They happen. And so, my call is, if you are a Christian, if you say that book is perfect and infallible and stuff, that's what I want you to talk about. I want you to talk about the year of Jubilee and canceling all of this debt. Because we all realize, either if you're a Christian or a Jew, or just if you're just a human being with common sense and says, hey, you know what? Maybe we're evolving. And we're basically making this up as we go. And we all need to recognize all of this. We're just making it up as we go. There's nothing natural about our money system and our economic system and our finance. It's all our imagination. And we need to come to a realization that, yeah, every 50 years, we got to hit the reset. We know we're addicted to money. We can't stop using it. It does serve its purpose, but we need to keep it realistic. We can't have debt. And especially to the point where 1% of the population owns 70% of the wealth. That's ridiculous. How we gotta let people live. We gotta let people go. We gotta let people do all they can. And for that, we need forgiveness. That's the most powerful force in the universe, not only from the Christian religion, but every spiritual teacher out there worth his salt from every tradition says the same thing. Forgiveness is key. You got to let go, move on.
Yeah, that's one of the primary F words, forgiveness.
Absolutely.
And it's a tough one, because in the Christian experience, instead of starting with the really good news, which is that, hey, you're free and it can be really cool, it starts with, well, first let me tell you why you're in a whole lot of trouble and you have to buy my insurance product, which is forgiveness. And to be able to turn that around into a place where, forgiveness is freedom. Forgiveness is the foundation. That any idea that you're in any kind of bondage at any time, financial, emotional, relational, whatever, is inside this larger context, that we do recognize that I'm the one writing the story. We're the ones making it up. And if there comes a time, which I think has surely come, when it's not working, that we have absolute authority and indeed a responsibility to write the story a better way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we are now. I think those of us who aren't followers of the Judeo-Christian sect, that's fine. But like I said, we still got to recognize that all of this whole monetary system is made up, and we got to forgive that debt. Those of us who are involved in that Judeo-Christian tradition, need to be called on that and saying, okay, then put some energy on this, because this is really important right now, especially considering the fact that we're in this pandemic right now, and all this debt is owed. And a lot of us are like, okay, we need to pay the masters their due. Either we pay the masters their due, or we're homeless, and that's the choice that we're left to make in the land of the free. That just doesn't fly,
Right.
And there's got to be a realization that, for so many of these property owners who so badly need their continued money, it's one of those things that you need to realize that if they never get this money, they're never going to notice. A lot of them have more money they can possibly spend in 10 or 12 lifetimes. So if they don't get our little pittance, it's not going to matter. And I don't know, were they to forgive some of that debt, it's not going to harm them. It's just going to create a more vibrant community and a more vibrant economy where people can go out and start actually spending money again. Because right now, there's so many people who are just doing what they do just to make the ends meet because the masters need their money.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's not just the slaves who are in a system of slavery, it's the masters also. And I think that's kind of the hidden thing inside this ancient idea, is that the big reason that we have Jubilee, that we have a do-over button inside the game, is that everybody gets stuck in a position that doesn't work. There have been lots of studies that say there's actually a maximum income at which your happiness peaks out, and beyond that, you only feel the pain of the idea of losing some of your wealth, and you never get any happier. So it's an addiction for those who need to be forgiven of being the boss of the thing too, because the system only works when it works for everybody.
Yeah, they say there's the test that's been done on that. I think it's like $75,000 a year puts you in that position where all your needs are going to be covered, and you're cool, and you really have the freedom to live your life however you want to do at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they say is that peak happiness level. As far as what money money offers you, because I mean, if some of us, if we get $500, we're going to be elated. That's a great, huge amount of money. But if you already got $5 million, well, $500 isn't going to make you happy. And so
Right.
that's kind of the point of that is a lot of things that make some of us happy just don't make all of us happy anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to get to the point where we're at least encouraging our society to allow people to have as much of that freedom as possible, instead of catering to this idea as, okay, here's the game. You need to collect as much of this stuff as you can. You need to take it out of the system, and you need to have it in your accounts. And this is the game now. We have to get as much as possible and take it away from as many people as possible to do that.
Right.
And that's just, it puts us in this mindset of constant competition where you've got to compete for those dollars because they're so scarce, and you got to get as many as you can. And it puts you in conflict with the world. It puts you into that mindset where every day is a competition, and every day you need to compete, and every day is a fight, a struggle. And life doesn't need to be that way. Life provides, especially looking at the Christian mindset, or that Christ sought to teach was, the birds of the air are cared for, the flowers of the field are cared for. Why are you worrying about stuff?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And we get ourselves to the point where we give people that freedom. And if there's anyone in the Christian church who wants to do that and start asking questions about Jubilee and start mentioning that word and bringing it up and questioning, how do we get past this man-made system? Because there really is, as the Bible said, the way that seems right to a man, but that way always ends in death. And that's what this system that we're serving so much of, is doing. It's leading us to our death.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're so beholden to it, we are literally making it so that we will not be able to survive on this planet at some point in the next, maybe a few decades, because we have to turn everything into money, because we have to get. We have to do that. That's the most important thing. And so we're all scurrying around, burning up every ounce of our time, every calorie of our energy, every drop of fossil fuels or oils and coal and everything, burning it all so that we can make this money to pay off these masters and these ridiculous man-made debts, instead of stopping to realize that, we need to let that stuff go. And let's look at what's really important in life. Right. So that's what I want to see happen.
Because money, this whole money construct, you're right, it is absolutely imaginary. It's a very persistent illusion, like the illusion that we exist. But what it stands for is this external thing that takes the place of my intrinsic value. And when I subject myself to the monetary system, I mean, especially because it's got its roots in empire and domination and the rape of the earth. And I mean, it just goes on and on. What's wrong with the money itself, the dirt, the emotional dirt and baggage on the money, that I lose my connection to my own value, to the value of my own life. And it kind of short circuits that pursuit of happiness, because there's no pursuit of anything but the money that stands between me and all the things that I want.
Yeah, and that's the big challenge, and it does work as a good tool for accounting for things and keeping track of things. And there's a chapter in my book, I wrote a book called Money, Sex, Power, and Faith, that looks at how our culture has developed over the last 10,000 years. And there was one of the economists from the Federal Reserve Bank had written an article a few years ago that said money is memory. And for that, it works fantastically, and where it is now, where 91.5% of it is digital. Only less than 10% of our money supply is actually coin or cash. Most of it is just digital. It's just energy and information. That's it. It doesn't exist in material form at all. Mm-hmm. But it does work well, as we're seeing in blockchain and that sort of thing. We can start using it to keep track of what needs to keep track of. But a lot of times you just got to erase it and let it go, because you're keeping track of it doesn't matter anymore, And the fact that we use money so often as that proxy for value, as you were talking about, those are times when we often don't use the tool properly. And every tool you got to use properly. There's that quote that if you see every problem as a nail, you're gonna answer it all with a hammer. And that's not the way we need to use money. There are certain things we do need to use it for, and certain things we shouldn't use it for. And unfortunately, we've used it for a lot of things that it shouldn't be used for. So we need to get back to what the real value is.
It's become, yeah, a substitute for the moral high ground. It's become a substitute for wisdom. If you got enough of it, you can push your agenda through, even if you're demonstrably insane and an enemy of humanity. You can just buy your way through, because it becomes a system that's no longer tied to, well, anything that actually makes sense. I love what you said there, that money is memory, because that really brings us to the situation that we're sharing on the planet right now in another direction. We've got all this debt in the memory of the financial system, and by the same token, we've got all this debt in our subconscious mind. You know, you call it karma, you call it trauma, you call it all kinds of things. We've got all these memories below the surface of all the bad things that have been done to us, all the bad things we've done to other people, all the dirty secrets that people don't want to come out, and they'll protect themselves with their financial power to make sure it doesn't happen. But you know, that jubilee, that do-over, means everybody just gets to say, wow, I was fucking crazy. Can we start again? And you know, I mean, that's the point where people come up against forgiveness and say, nope, not going to forgive that, by golly. But just the letting go of the debt we believe we have in our own minds, that I have to keep chewing on the badness of the people around me. I have to keep fingering the beads of how evil the evil are. That's the same kind of trap as the people who have too much money to be happy. You know, I have too much resentment to experience the joy of my own life.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're often, caught in that in our own, as you said, our karma as well, because we think about, all the things that we don't deserve and we have to pay back because of the bad things that we've done, and a lot of that is this, we've been taught some really bad lessons,
Mm-hmm.
and the challenge for me, especially in the Christian community, is, as you said, you start the story by saying what's wrong with you, and that you're in to say you have this debt and you deserve to be punished for all eternity. But they don't go back a little bit further to look at the basis, the main character of this story being God. And that story that, in the beginning, God made all this stuff and it was all good. That was original design. And then he gave man free will. And then shortly after said, oops, didn't see that coming, And so the caricature that is created about God, that he's so short-sighted and fallible.
Yeah. God's dumb. In the Bible, God's dumb and mean.
Yeah, and so I think that we need to relook at that story and realize what this character really is, and it's us creating God in our image, and we're these fallible creatures, and it allowed us as humans to create these hierarchies and kingdoms and get a lot of stuff done, but at what expense, and I think now is the time where we have to look back and say, we need to tell a new story. This is a story we've been telling for quite a while, and we need to retell the story, because the story we're telling about God is that he's very short-sighted, or he doesn't care really about us.
Or
He just,
what I heard for really kind of the first time when I did the Holy Roller thing, because I was raised Presbyterian, and they're just like, just very intellectual, reasonable people. But I came down here and got into the whole, and a big part of what the church is doing in its far right aspect is fighting the devil. And all the energy is on the big bad guy, who apparently is maybe a little stronger than God. So we got to protect the old dude from the big bad guy. And it really becomes this unconscious worship of evil. And that mindset, I think, has taken over a bit of our reality.
Yeah, I've often said the big problem with a lot of Christians is they're just such good Satanists, and because I've never heard anyone who claimed to be a Satanist be as much a proponent for Satan and be so empowering for Satan as so many Christians are, and it's not most Christians, but it's just that evangelical bent, and there's that cluster of different churches who just, saying Satan can control this world and he's making it all happen, and they watch the news and they say Satan, 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 Satan. Right. And they look around and all they see is the work of Satan, and they never see the work of God. And somewhere along the way, you lost sight of what you're actually supposed to be seeing, I think.
Right.
because I see God at work all over the place. I see some men making and women making some horrific mistakes every day, but it's just part of life. It's how we learn. It's the process.
Mhm.
But I don't see, Satan not working all the time. I see God doing amazing things. What I know is God, not the caricature. But
Yeah. Yeah. So when I, was going through my process of taking back the good parts, sort of like the Princess Bride, right? I'm going to take back the good parts of the story, is I had to go back to the first chapter. And that's really the only place where it's working. In the beginning, the Elohim, who are a plural being, so you've got, the male and female together, this one complete being, you've got an actual family of divinity, says, hey, wouldn't it be cool to make a world? It's like, yeah, and look how good we made it. And then the next thing that happens, that's the first time anything is not good, is when it's this, well, it doesn't even matter what it is, because that's the point at which it becomes the record of everything that went wrong. And all the real instructions on how to do it are in that first chapter. And it's exactly what you said. It's you got to be able to look at what is and say it's good. I don't know how it's going to play out, but I know that those are the rules. Everything that happens here is happening inside of a good perspective. I mean, it's a good plan. It's a good judgment from the beginning. And if I'm judging it different than that, then I'm just in the cautionary tale, and I'd rather move back into the good part of the book.
Yeah, I've kind of often said, as far as the Bible is concerned, in the beginning, as you said, everything was good. The land, the air, the water, humans, all of them good.
Yeah.
That's the original design of everything. And then at the end of the book, after the revelation and all the other stuff that goes on there, everything's good again. So, it's good in the beginning, good in the end. Everything else is just commentary.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
all good.
and the revelation, right? It's not actually a story about a big war that has to happen. It's about the time when we realize that we could have been in that first chapter the whole time. It's like, honey, it was always good. It's like, did you like your suffering? Because you worked really hard for it.
Yeah. And, and again, not saying that the book is perfect or infallible, as a lot of devotees do. However, it still tells a story, and that's the story that we need to get through, forgive ourselves for continuing to tell that story, because it is kind of limited, and open up to the new story, to the greater abundance, the greater realization of what God really is. Not just this little character that fits in this little box that we need to kill people over and force them to believe in order for us to feel good about ourselves, but this greater entity that has provided every single breath we've ever had, every beat of our heart, every one of these cells that comes together and cohesively works throughout this planet, everything, and beyond just all of our ideas of what it could be, it's just so much more. And living in that reality of understanding that entity that has given you all those breaths and every sight you've ever seen and sound you've ever heard and everything you've ever had is continuing to provide for you as long as you open up to it. That's a truer faith. And the new story we need to start telling is that we're all just blessedly provided for, regardless of the story we have been telling over the last few years. Now it's in a new time. We're in a new place. We're all rising like phoenixes, and let's let go of the old and move into the new.
Yeah, and that's that emotional jubilee.
That's exactly it.
That's really the opportunity, I think, that's being presented to us, and perhaps the reason behind everything falling apart is that I really feel that on some level we're getting everything we asked for. And we're just so used to complaining. We're saying, well, why doesn't it work anymore? It's like, because it never worked and you asked for it to go away. It's like that the skill that's just totally missing here is the skill to say, yes, thank you, more please. Yes, that was good. Because even like what could have been the greatest instruction in the Bible, one of my teachers always said, God said it 365 times, so there's one for every day, and I never counted, is fear not. But the problem is that when you tell people what not to do, you just screwed the whole thing, because you're looking at the things you fear and trying to make them not happen. And if we can just translate that into give thanks, in all things give thanks. That's what that nice Hebrew boy said.
Yeah, well, this has been said that the universe doesn't understand a negative. The universe, as it's creating, all you know the universe are the positive things that you see that are created. You don't see the negative space. You don't see the dark void and the dark space and the dark matter. all that negative. And so when you put something like fear not in there, well, you just saying fear. that's
Right.
what you're throwing out there, you know. And so that's the challenge with this entire tradition is fear. That's the
Yeah.
whole thing. Let me tell you something. You should be afraid because when you die, you're going to suffer for all of eternity. Now, let's talk about this life.
Let's
You
talk
know,
about why you shouldn't fear. Now that we
yeah,
taught you to fear.
the story starts with that. And, you know, even though fewer and fewer people, I think, are following that tradition that says that we're all destined to suffer for all eternity, um, it's still been ingrained into so many of other life lessons, into so many other stories that we tell, and so many of the ways that we run our system, you know, and
Right.
run our work, you know,
Right.
and that's unfortunately gotten us to this point where we're really hell-bent on punishing people because we've used that that picture, that caricature of God as the arbiter of justice, you know, so much so that in our country of land of the free, we have more people in prison than any other country on the planet, hands down.
Yeah.
You know, we're all about punishing people, and so
Right.
we need to start forgiving that and realize that, yeah, we're all evolving, we're all changing, we're all becoming what we can be, and a lot of that needs to be in forgiveness and allowing people to do that. And now that we've realized that, you know, marijuana should never have been illegal, ever, that right should never have been stripped from humanity. We have destroyed millions of lives because of the fear that was in that plant, and we feared that plant, and some of us said Satan made that plant because Satan has more power than God.
Right.
And that's
Right.
so many Christians cowering, having no faith in their God. They were
Yeah.
afraid. You know, there's no faith there. And so now we're at a point where we're realizing, oh, look at that. Nature was providing for us all along. If we had used this medicinal plant wisely for the last 100 years instead of cowering in fear, imagine how different life would be right now. Imagine how many lives would not have been taken through overdoses of other drugs and other pharmaceuticals. Imagine how many people would not have been imprisoned and become criminals. You know, imagine how different it would be. And now we're at that point where we can open up to that and not be afraid of it anymore. Now we can educate ourselves, you know, some of us anyway. Some states are still pretty afraid of it. And of course, the federal government is still afraid of it because it likes control. But, you
Well,
know,
they're going to be afraid of it until they tie up all the patents so they get to make the money on the new on the new
yeah,
market. I mean, that's the cynical approach.
yeah, but that's,
You made a really important point, is that I do not know what the percentages are, but a whole lot of people would say that they absolutely do not believe in hell, do not believe in that Old Testament God, do not believe any of that stuff. Nonetheless, it is the base code of our unconscious because, like you say, it's written into the story behind the story of all the systems that we're inside of. So it's almost more insidious if you know that you don't believe it, because then you don't realize that you do. Sort of like that Christian trap of, well, of course I believe, God's in charge, but my actions say that I'm scared that Satan is. And when I can't see my own darkness because it's just too much to handle, then I'm in thrall to it.
yeah, basically that's the way that it goes. You know, that's where we get caught. There's all those things that we're afraid of, and instead of the things that are wonderful and are amazing, you know. And I think with this whole debt cycle that you're talking about, are these things we have to cling to, because if we let go of what's been done in the past, you know, how are we going to provide for the future?
Right.
And realize that the same way that the past was provided in the first place is going to continue to be created and all that, you know.
Well, that comes back to that whole, the other F word, faith. That it's a tough one because we are so indoctrinated into what to be afraid of that we don't really learn how to have faith in goodness, because you kind of have to choose one. Do you have faith in the power of fear to protect you from evil, or do you have faith in the goodness of life to hold you and take care of everything? And it's like I've come to think of it as a conscious sacrifice. That we're trained to think that sacrifice means, the point where you let yourself be hurt in hopes that you get something better. But it really means is the thing that you do to bring the beauty back.
Right.
I will sacrifice my fear. I mean, it's an old, it's one of the old worship songs. I'm laying it down for the joy. I will sacrifice my fear for the equivalent amount of joy. I will trade in my debt for the equivalent amount of peace. It's a worthy exchange, I think.
Yeah, and they say, sacrifice actually means to make sacred. That's what you're really doing. This is whatever you are sacrificing, you're recognizing this is thing that's sacred in your life. And by sacrificing something, you're making it all the more so. That's
so. What does that word mean? What does that word mean to you? That's a bugaboo, but I think it's increasingly important. What sacred? Truly, actually sacred, not a sacred cow, not a big phony baloney trying to manipulate you with my holier than thou, but truly, actually sacred. What is that?
I think it's that thing that you really care for in a I don't know, holy and special way. I would think, something that is important to you and revered and appreciated in ways that other things aren't, I guess. And that's a loaded question.
It is. It's kind of the biggest question there is. But I ask it just, I guess, as much as anything to point out the fact that we stop thinking in those terms.
Sure. Yeah.
And that something has to be sacred or everything is profane. I mean, that's
Right.
the division in the language between the sacred and the profane. The things that I will stand for, the things that must not be violated. And I guess what pulls it all together here is that we have this opportunity to acknowledge the sacredness of the system of life that Earth has given us, that exists here, the system of life that holds us all together. And I guess that's, for me, that's what's sacred here is, I'm going to call it Gaia, Mother God. The missing piece that makes Father God not a crazy, lonely old jerk anymore, but part of the family of which we are the children. That this creation that was given to us, that was good, that still is good, that's sacred. That memory of home, that memory of oneness, that vision of beauty that guides us in a way that we create beauty, that's sacred. It's not something you go to war to protect. It's something you just hold and enjoy, and it works its magic in this wonderful, soft, lovely way.
Yeah, I think it's the way that you experience things as well. I mean, making the moment sacred and the enjoyment of life sacred is really what all of the other things that we hold sacred are about. Is to get us into that zone where we can live in the sacred moment, and it's just realization that life is unfolding around you and through you, and you're all part of it, and it's all connected. And so many times we hold our scriptures sacred or things outside of ourselves that we have to force ourselves to argue about or create apologetics about, or those kind of things, instead of all of our scriptures or other things that we think are sacred, or as Alan Watts said behind me, they're all fingers pointing to the moon, but they're not the moon itself. And when you can live that sacred moment, live in that holy instant, as Course in Miracles said, that's where real sacrifice comes, where you're able to let go of everything else for that moment. When you're all sacred, it's all good.
Yeah, I sacrifice my pain to make sacred my life.
Yeah.
You mentioned A Course in Miracles. That's been coming up a lot lately with Marianne Williamson sort of quietly sitting in the background, leading the country while everything's going crazy. And that's I find a really powerful tool, because it brings actual sanity and Christian language together again, where it actually does that thing we're talking about. It points toward the goodness. It points toward the power. It points toward what you should be able to do if you actually follow the teachings of that. I call him that nice Hebrew boy, that you should be able to alter the world around you through this. And the number one principle is this radical forgiveness. I mean, radical forgiveness, because nothing matters but my freedom. And that comes on the other side of letting it all go.
Right. Yeah, because if you got to hold the grudge, then you got to carry on to that, and you're not able to do all the wonderful, amazing things that you could do if you were able to let it go, and if, and the Course of Miracles says a lot about that. And forgiveness is the reason we're here.
Mm-hmm.
It's our whole reason for existence, is to be able to forgive and live. If you can do that, then you can live out that role of God and realize that, it's all coming through you, exactly as Jesus and all of the other spiritual masters have said throughout the ages, and just opening up to that. And that's, that's where we need to be, is forgiving all of the fallibilities that humankind has displayed over the last 10,000 years or so, as we continually try to make our way and try to find our way. And we've made mistake after mistake after mistake, just like everyone does as individuals. Our society is no different, and we need to forgive all of that and recognize that, our whole monetary system, it was made up. We're making up along, communism, socialism, all those things are just things we're making up, mistakes along the way. Capitalism, if I can criticize it in this area, but it's just something we made up. And forgive ourselves for making mistakes along the way, but get back to recognizing what's really important.
Right.
And being that conduit of life, conduit of service, conduit of love and joy and peace and kindness, and self-control and gentleness. Those are all the key fruits of the Spirit that we all want, not just in Christianity, but throughout all of the other religious and spiritual traditions. Are all pointing toward that same thing, and having that ability to live in the sacred moment and just be that hand of God working in the world. And this is the key way to do that, is to realize that everybody is making this all up. And none of us knows what's going on, other than the fact that we're here in this present moment and we get to live in this eternal life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. You've said that a couple times, and I think it's a real key, that maybe the simplest expression of what is sacred is that present moment, is our presence. My presence in my life. That's when I am in joy. That's when I'm in sacredness. That's when I'm in harmony. That's when I'm connected with that God mind. That's when I'm in the garden. That's when I'm back in the first chapter. That's when it's working. That, the language is pretty beautiful, the way that things just double back on each other. They call it the present because it's a gift. It's the place where everything comes together and works.
Yeah, I wonder if that was intentional.
I think it's all intentional. Yeah. And that to me is what holds me together. The reason I wanted to put this in a Christian context is because it was such a big deal for me to go back, because the wounds were so deep. I mean, my ability to care about anything was just messed up, because the story is like an artful trap. And all kinds of things happen that are not really relevant anymore, because I decided my peace was more important than my pain. Sure. But there was a point at which, saying, I've been like talking to Jesus and thinking about Christ is like one of the craziest things I could possibly say. And expecting people to respond like, burn the witch, because something in me was feeling that. And being able to truly be at peace with all of the stories. It's like, I'm willing to put all of the history of degradation that happened in the name of the church down to wrong use of language. Because I don't care if it was done on purpose. It looks to me like a simple coding error, and we can just change that and be happy. And I would rather do that than fight another holy war.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you can only reconcile it with yourself, but each one of us has to tell our own story, and together we'll tell that greater story. But forgiving the misuse of language, as you said, over these last few centuries is huge. It's a big thing we got to do.
Yeah, and just let it be okay. It always keeps coming down to that, allowing the goodness to flow, allowing the good thing to be here now, in the present. Sacred
Very
present
much.
moment. So
Yeah.
I'll put some links below this. You've got books that are available now. When the world opens up again, you'll have performances that are available, and websites where you post this, that, and the other thing. Is there anything you'd like specifically to call out to people's attention before we go?
There is a new project I just put out with Martha Robinson, and it's called the What If Journal. And so it's a 30-day journal, and basically it works that in the night, in the evening or sometime before you go to bed, you write a what if question. You know, what if I were president, or what if money were no longer a thing, or what if whatever thing you can imagine, and you sleep on that. And the next morning you get up and then you write about that for a few pages. You answer your own question, and it allows for the imagination to work again, to stretch your bounds. And so, go and you can go to stevemc.xyz and you can find that book and all of my other music and books and blogs and other stuff there as well.
Terrific. Thanks for spending a little time with me on a Friday afternoon in the midst of the global insanity.
Thanks for inviting me.
Always a pleasure.
Good to see you
See you on
again.
the other side.
Yay.
So thanks for going on this journey into the mystic. If you want to find out more about the sound healing work that I do, the Human Experience Quick Start Guide, or to achieve your personal declaration of sovereignty, which is a whole nother can of worms, you can visit KayleenMcCaw.com. And I look forward to continuing this conversation.